Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next BBC Sherlock episode review. This is going to be my first review of Season 3, and also my first time reviewing just an individual Sherlock episode. This is going to be my review for 301, The Empty Hearse, the premiere of Season 3. So, obviously this had a huge build up to it being the first new episode of Sherlock in 2 years. Not just, us waiting between episodes, but also the time between episodes as well in universe as well. So a lot to live up to with this episode, and overall I thought it was a really good episode. I had very few kind of negative points about the episode, and I just really did love it. There was a lot of funny moments, a lot of character moments. The plot was reasonably interesting, and all the kind of new kind of season 3 stuff was done really well as well. So I'm just going to get straight into the specifics because obviously it's a 90-minute episode. There's a lot to talk about. So I'm just have some notes written down. Just going to go through some of them more or less. So I'll start off with where the episode starts off, and that's with basically getting straight into kind of how he survived the fall at the end of season 2. And they do two fake outs over the course of the episode before the actual reveal, apparently. But the first one I thought was a brilliant decision, to make this the first thing you see in season 3, but then cut straight away and show this is just Anderson's theory on what happened. And it was just hilarious the way it was done, because that's kind of the way you imagine kind of it went down, just Sherlock doing something epic. But obviously the big thing there would be that, like, I don't really see Sherlock doing the whole dive through the window, kiss Molly sort of thing, just because, the way his character is set up. I don't think he'd do that, and given what happens in the episode, it's obviously not true. The second one, again, it's just funny. It's just hilarious that playing on the whole fan fiction sort of thing that people come up with, the various ships that people do. It was just hilarious to see the two of them kind of acting as friends, kind of just trolling John, and then they kind of lean in for the kiss. It was a really good moment. And I like that they did do the fake out twice, because I thought when they cut to it this time, they were actually going to show what happened. And then finally we get to the reveal of what actually happened, or at least that's what Sherlock's telling people what happened. The end, like one of the last scenes in the episode, kind of hints at, like, maybe it wasn't true when John asks, but I'm not really sure. I think the last one has to be true, just because it explains more than the other ones. It's the only explanation that we've got so far that doesn't kind of contradict what we saw at the end of the Reichenbach fall, and that it doesn't change anything. It explains some other stuff, like why the girl screamed when she saw Sherlock, the body that they eventually used, that made sense. And then just in general, the fact that conveniently John was hit by a bicyclist at this time, and all of these kind of other things that were convenient. Everything was planned. It worked out well. I think that is ultimately what happened. Maybe some of the details aren't quite correct, but it was. I was happy with the reveal. I liked what I saw. It was. As Anderson said, it was kind of just almost disappointing in a way, but at the end of the day, there was so much behind this, waiting for the explanation, that I'm glad they actually had fun with it throughout the early parts of the episode, and that they just, like, this is what you wanted to happen, it didn't. This is what some people wanted to happen, it didn't. This is what really happened, and it is kind of, like, logical, not as maybe dramatic as you would think, but it's still really interesting. Next one I have is John trying to move on with Mary, and then how this is all kind of interrupted by Sherlock's return. I just like the kind of, before the two actually reunited, you saw that John is still really affected by the death of Sherlock, and he's trying to move on with Mary, and he's about to make the kind of last, I suppose, big move in that, and proposing to Mary and getting married and stuff like that. But as this happens, that's when Sherlock returns and kind of turns everything up on its head, and it's back to kind of change again for John. So I just liked how that kind of all went there, and I'll talk about the actual scene itself later on, but I just like that whole thing that they did throughout the episode with John trying to move on, and Sherlock comes back, and then it's all about him trying to, I suppose, forgive Sherlock for basically lying to him being one of the people he didn't tell, and John feeling like, well, you told all these other people, but not me. That was interesting. Um, we get an explanation of what Sherlock did for the 2 years that he was gone, and that was 2 years taking down Moriarty's network, and then eventually he's saved by Mycroft as he takes down the last part of this network. I thought that was a great decision. Moriarty did talk about this criminal network he was involved with, and it made sense that he took that down and that he needed to be kind of apparently out of action. That was really, really good explanation there. I like that. And then him being saved by Mycroft, setting up him coming back to London, setting up the mystery of this episode. A lot of good stuff in that on that side of things too. The one weak part of the episode I thought was the terrorist plot to destroy Parliament. The only reason I say it was a bit weak is because there was so much other stuff going on in the episode that it didn't get the same amount of time that other cases in the series have got and probably will get going to the next two episodes. It really did constitute a very small part of the episode with so much else going on, so much focus on how he survived the fall, the reunion between John and Sherlock, the whole thing about John being kidnapped, Mary being introduced, the stuff with Molly, him introducing himself to the other characters, and all this other stuff, just taking time away that maybe could have gone into this. For what it was, I thought they gave it just about enough time, but it definitely wasn't the strongest kind of case plot to the episode. I like the kind of use of the kind of that minor character with the who like the trains, him helping them out. The whole idea of setting up the mystery of he gets on the train, then he doesn't come off, then one of the cars is missing, and the whole idea of what was behind it was interesting enough, but there was just no real setup for, wait, why has this happened? It just about says it in that the minister that was doing this was like allied with North Korea and wanted to blow them up before they could agree on some anti-terrorist bill or something like that. It just needed a little bit more time to really kind of come across as crazy serious. Like right now, it just came across as a little bit like, we need a plot here and this is it. Hopefully they link it into more stuff going into the next two episodes. But yeah, I'll talk about the reunion now. I like that they did a little bit of setup before it happened, in that you have Sherlock talking to his brother Mycroft about this, and he's just expecting, like, oh, he'll be happy to see me. Maybe I'll jump out of a cake, and thinking it's all going to be happy. He's not really thinking about how John's been feeling the past 2 years, how much it hurt him to see his best friend gone, and just how much John has been through, and he just doesn't think about that, and that's who Sherlock is. He doesn't really think too much about human nature, as Mary kind of points out later on. And then when it happened, John really just struggles to forgive him. He's angry at Sherlock for basically keeping this from him. He's meant to be his best friend, and he kept this from him. And as much as, he did good with the kind of time he was away, it still, hurt him, and he's angry and only forgives him at the end of the episode. But I just really liked the way they did that. It wasn't just a happy reunion. They actually put a lot of character stuff throughout the whole episode into this dynamic, and it was something people were really waiting to see, and I was eager to see how it happened. And how it happened was it was actually surprisingly funny. I didn't expect it to be as funny as it was, but it was just him going in expecting it to be okay, then just seeing John, and he's just kind of like, I kind of need to ease him into this a little bit, so he gets the kind of waiter disguise, and then he's doing the multiple things like, I think you'll find the wine quite familiar. It's like, it could be a surprise, and John's just not looking at him, and then eventually he reveals it, and then John just goes from like being happy about to propose to suddenly like, you, and then Mary kind of catches on and she's like, oh no. And it was just, they made it a big scene, and I was a bit worried that it wouldn't live up to expectations, this reunion scene, but it was really well done. I suppose getting into Mary herself as a character newly introduced, I liked the way they used her in this episode, and that she wasn't like incredibly like an incredible main character in this episode, that they didn't give her a ton of screen time, but they did introduce her. I think that it really kind of helped that she didn't in any way kind of overshadow the reunion scene. She actually helped it to kind of go along, because she actually liked Sherlock. She laughed at the kind of jokes he was making, even though they were kind of weirdly timed. The whole thing about the moustache, she laughed at that. Even though she understood how serious this was for John, she knows how much it put him through. But she likes him, and then he ends up kind of liking her. He does the kind of deduction on her, but doesn't reveal any of it to her or saying it. He's just like, okay, you can do this. So I was pleasantly surprised with how kind of good of a character she was. The show at times has had a bit of a problem with like introducing kind of new characters into the show, but this one was really well done. And it just she actually played a nice role in just kind of almost helping the two, not just have this kind of really kind of angry reunion. It worked well. Let's see, what else do I have here? Also with Mary, we get the kind of apparent setup for something that links her to the new overall villain of season 3, who we meet at the very end of the episode, in that it's revealed at the end that the part of this episode that he set up was John being kidnapped and put under the bonfire, about to be killed, and that he texted Mary directly. It wasn't through Sherlock or anything like that. So he clearly links into with her somehow, and that maybe links into the Sherlock's read of her, where some of the words that come up were like lies, illusionment, and then some other stuff like that that is kind of like a bit suspicious. But anyway, we'll find out more about that later on. I'm sure Mary will get a lot more time in the next episode with the wedding, and then hopefully the last episode as well. But next scene I want to talk about is the Sherlock and Mycroft scene, which this one probably took me most by surprise, and in the end it's probably one of my favourite scenes of the episode, because I didn't really expect anything with this relationship. They haven't done an incredible amount over the course of the series to advance it that much. I think A Scandal in Belgravia had a really good scene, but here we get a really interesting scene. The two are just playing games, discussing the kind of terrorist plot, seeing where Sherlock is on this whole thing, and they're playing games. And then it kind of comes to, they're going to play this game of deduction that they used to play. They start talking about how when they weren't introduced to any other kids, both of them thought that Sherlock was super unintelligent because Mycroft was kind of above Sherlock. But when they met other kids, they realized that they were both different to everyone else, and it was kind of a surprise to kind of hear that technically Mycroft is the more intelligent of the two. It was interesting, but I suppose kind of worked in a way, and that you later see what kind of balances it out is what basically they talk about next in the deduction thing. Sherlock talks about the whole isolation thing, and then kind of puts Mycroft into this corner where he kind of has to admit that when you're different, you don't have to be isolated, which is kind of what Mycroft is doing. You don't really see him with any friends as such, and in many ways he's kind of even worse socially than Sherlock. He just has his kind of manners to make him appear more kind of polite to people, while Sherlock doesn't kind of bother too much with manners. But the big thing is that he actually is okay with having friends, while Mycroft isn't. And then you get the whole thing of different doesn't have to be isolated. It's okay being different. And when Sherlock puts the funny hat on, it was just a really interesting scene, and like Mrs. Hudson was just like, yes, you got him. At that moment, she just kind of basically forced Mycroft to almost admit that he is kind of lonely. He like forces himself to not have any friends because he looks down on everyone, while Sherlock looks down on some people, but he's okay with accepting people as being his friend. It was a nice scene. I very surprised with how good it was. Going to my second page of notes, Sherlock, obviously when he and John are fighting, not really talking, he then asks Molly to basically come out and help him on his cases, basically to take on the role of John. But he instantly kind of says, don't try to be John, be yourself. And over the course of the kind of day when they're doing all the cases, she gradually gets more and more into it. And it's interesting, at the start, it starts off, I want to ask you to kind of come out in cases of me, and she says dinner, when we later find out that at that point in time she's engaged already and has kind of tried to get past Sherlock, her kind of love of him. But I think the big thing that this whole kind of thing with Molly showed was that not necessarily too much with the romance between the two, just that she really is part of that kind of circle of friends that Sherlock has now. That he he's kind of in many ways tried to kind of keep her apart, and that was the big mistake that Moriarty made. He didn't see her as a part of that group, but he now that Moriarty's out of the way, he's accepting her into that group properly now, and she's just as important as Lestrade and all those people. And that was it was just a nice scene between the two, especially the kind of one at the end of the day where he says, "You don't want to do this again, but I did this because I wanted to thank you," and she realized that he's kind of doing this because he needs someone and he wants John back, and it was just a really good scene between the two, I think. And again, I wasn't expecting an incredible amount between the two, but this did a really good job at kind of continuing that. Throughout the day, you see Sherlock constantly hearing John's voice, saying his little smart lines that he usually would say, and Sherlock almost expecting them, but Molly not quite doing that. It was interesting. And then the later reveal that she's engaged to someone called Tom, who basically looks identical to Sherlock, and you're just like, she says she's over him, but is she? Does she realize that he looks identical to Sherlock? I have a feeling there's still more to come with that whole thing. The end with the kiss on the cheek was nice as well, just kind of showing that while Sherlock isn't going to change anytime soon with regards to like whole romance thing, he tries to kind of show a kind of more human side to some people, and that was nice to see. The whole John being kidnapped thing, in many ways, is the odd section out of the episode, in that the only thing really linking it is that it allows Sherlock to kind of meet up with John again, and kind of just to kind of soothe down the anger of the whole thing, that he's saved by Sherlock and Mary, and it allows those two to get a little bit of bonding time as well, while also setting up the new villain at the end. I'm still wondering where exactly that's going, but I'm sure we'll find out next episode, episode 3, stuff like that. But yeah, it was pretty kind of crazy, with the countdown constantly flashing back. We know he's under the bonfire. It's about to be late. There's a delay. They get more time, and just seeing like how intense Sherlock and Mary are about saving him was really good to see. And Sherlock just jumping straight on top of the bonfire late, pulling stuff off him. It just really shows how big of connection there is between everyone. Kind of almost a random scene in the episode, but the scene where we meet Sherlock and Mycroft's parents was interesting. That, like John, I was just like, wow, they are so normal. Given how kind of unusual the two kids are, it's just weird to see just these normal kind of older people. I was like, wow, I was exactly with John on this one. And then it kind of, I think it really helped kind of break the ice between the two, and that there was this kind of awkward situation, are you okay? Yeah. And then just talking about the parents allowed them to just kind of get back their friendship again. It was a pretty important scene, actually. I really liked it. The name of the episode is obviously The Empty Hearse. We find out what that refers to with it's the club that Anderson has set up for basically Sherlock fans, Sherlock conspiracy theorists who didn't think he was dead. We don't get too many scenes, and maybe it's not quite worthy of being the episode title, but I suppose with the focus on how he survived the fall, it just about works. I like Anderson in this episode, just the whole idea of, he gives the crazy story, cuts to him. Lestrade kind of gives him this guilt trip about how he's very responsible for what happened, making everyone believe. You see him and Sally in front of the newspaper looking responsible, and it all kind of comes together. And then the kind of end scene where he gets Sherlock on camera to reveal how he did it and explain it. They have a kind of back and forth about it, and then Sherlock reveals that the kind of weird moment of the episode with the whole Jack the Ripper book skeleton thing was actually caused by Anderson to lure Sherlock out of hiding because he knew he was back. And then it was kind of like Sherlock's revenge, where he just got Anderson to start begging in front of him. It was a kind of nice little revenge scene. You doubted me, I've got you begging right now, and then just showing that Anderson has kind of changed. You respect Sherlock now. Interesting to see where they go with Anderson, if he's even in the next few episodes. How they go about him and Sherlock. Will Anderson just go back to the way he was before, where he kind of starts kind of maybe insulting Sherlock a bit, or is there actually going to be something a bit different where he really respects Sherlock now or something? But anyway, that I like that. The whole bomb scene at the end, that was really good. As much as I maybe thought it could use more time, the actual conclusion to this whole case I thought was pretty interesting, and the kind of nice scenery of the deserted kind of section of track that hasn't been used. There's the missing car off the train, and the whole idea of like, this is going to not just blow up like a section of Parliament, it's just going to blow up the whole thing and Big Ben apparently. So big terrorist plot, and then they see the charges. They see the train is rigged up to blow, and then the countdown timer starts, and John's kind of going like, "Hey, go into your mind palace, figure all this out." That was cool, just the fact that John knows Sherlock well enough to just instantly go to him. You probably have something about this in your mind palace. Go there, and then just insulting him about, why don't you ever call the police and stuff like this. And then he actually, I found it interesting. Watching the episode a second time, John actually kind of calls him out when Sherlock starts saying, "I can't do it," that this is just a trick, isn't it? But then he kind of gets caught in when like Sherlock kind of starts to cry and stuff like that. But then it actually turns out that there was just a switch on the side. He turned it off, and the minute and a half that they had left was basically Sherlock just getting John to speak to him, kind of ignoring all the anger, just knowing they don't have much time left. Speak the truth to him. It's one of his weird ways that he does that. Like, what is it? It's in the Reichenbach Fall. He just goes up to like the teacher who on her watch let the kids be kidnapped, and he's just like really angry at her, but he just did it to get her to speak quickly. This is his way of getting John to speak kind of honestly about everything, taking the anger out of the equation, and he gets the kind of forgiveness scene, and just this amazing look on Benedict Cumberbatch's face, like when John says, "I forgive you." It's just like really nice, and then he just burst out laughing when they come back, and it is a brilliant scene. And then final scene I want to mention, just the very end one. He goes out to the media, and instead of like being forced by anyone to put on the hat, he just puts it on himself. And there's something like, there's a subtle change in his character from before. Just the fact that he's willing to do that himself. He's willing to just take on this role as the hat detective. It's just a really nice way to end the episode and set up where things are going. And this episode just did a really good job at introducing new characters like Mary. Had a bunch of little cases involved in it. Even though the overall main case was a bit weak, the fact that it had so many other kind of character stuff, like this episode had the reunion of John and Sherlock, it had the explanation for how he survived the fall, and all this other stuff. So really, really solid episode. I'm not quite sure where I'd rate it among all the other episodes. I really think I need to see the remaining 2 episodes of season 3 before I do any sort of rating all 9 episodes sort of thing. But very good episode. At the very least, this episode is probably into the top 3-4 episodes. But again, I need to just kind of remove myself from the excitement of new episode and then do it at the end of the season. But yeah, that's been my review. I'll review the next episode, The Sign of 3, I think it's called, the day after it comes out. So it's Sunday, so it's only 3 days away. I'll have my review out on Monday, so look out for that. Thanks for watching this episode review, and bye.